seedling of great and precious value. If you are only noticing the abundance of grape leaves and invasive exotics, you will miss it. It is a seedling rooted in inherent worth and dignity. It is a seedling rooted in justice, equity, and compassion. It is a seedling rooted in respect for scientific understanding and direct personal experience. It is a seedling rooted in the continuing growth and wisdom of knowledge. It is a seedling rooted in the continuing revelation of truth and meaning. It is a seedling rooted in interdependence and a network of mutuality. When we are in connection with that seedling, inspiration flows up from these roots. This morning, may we get ready to seek that seedling in what we hear. This morning, may we find inspiration from those roots. This morning, may we find our rootedness and inspiration make us ready for transformation of ourselves, our congregation, and our association, and our world as we join together in the celebration of life. I jumped ahead. Now the prelude we're going to enjoy was performed at the UUA General Assembly. Some of you may have heard it last 2 Sundays ago tomorrow by Kate and Justin Miner. And let's enjoy it one more time and let us light our chalice virtually with the words you'll see in the video. Welcoming all free seekers of truth and meaning, we gather to excite the human spirit, to inspire its growth and development, to respond morally and ethically to a troubled world, and to sustain a vital and nurturing religious community. And let us sing out praises for the journey along with Chris and Randy.
behind us, wayside hostel, built by those who knew wild roads. Guard we their sacred embers, carrying our minds and souls.
And we enjoy welcoming guests and visitors to our congregation. And the way that we register that we'd like to say that we are a guest or visitor this Sunday is by going to the participants window, which is down in the toolbar for Zoom, wherever you find it, and click that little blue hand that will let Chris know that you would like to share with us that you're a visitor today. Or if you'd like to introduce a visitor too. How are we doing, Chris? Do you see anybody that would like to introduce themselves? And you're muted, so we'll probably have to unmute yourself.
Go ahead.
Marilyn Doctor again, visiting.
Oh,
Yep.
Marilyn, great to have you visiting with us. Great, good to see your faces.
Yeah, this is about the third time we've, so.
Great.
All right.
Thank you.
And next up we have Paul. Paul, go ahead. You'll have to unmute yourself, Paul. There it goes. Go ahead.
Hi, this is my second or third time in the last 30 years, but 30 years, 25 or 30 years ago, I was coming regularly. And now I'm back.
Great to see you, Paul.
Good to see you.
Excellent.
I think we're up.
All right. Welcome to everyone. If you are new and you didn't introduce yourself, that's fine too. You'll notice in the chat window, there's a little welcome message there. And in that message, you can click a form to fill out so you can get on our mailing list and we can be in touch with you so you can find out all the great things that are going on here. Even though we're not physically present, we're virtually very busy place. And now we like to do a congregational greeting to each other, and we used to be able to do that by turning around and shaking the hand of the person next to us. In this format, we have something Zoom provides us called breakout rooms. So you're going to be sent to a breakout room. You can voluntarily go or not go, but we encourage you to go to a breakout room and greet the people you discover in your breakout room. Are you ready for that, Chris?
All right, let's go.
Wonderful. I think I'll stay here.
I'm staying here as well.
It sounds like for the Zoom, we didn't have any sound for that. Was that right?
Right.
Yeah. Oh, well.
Yeah. I just put in the chat several times that we were having technical difficulties.
Yeah,
people were pretty patient. I was watching. People were fairly,
Well, most people have seen it multiple times, so
Yeah.
I don't think it's a heartbreak to.
Yeah.
That was me. I clicked, I must have double clicked the share sound, so it turned off.
Yeah. Actually, in that one, you should probably click the video because you'll get a cleaner video when you.
Yeah, that I did, because when I went back.
Oh, that's interesting. Oh, okay. So
but the other one wasn't.
when you click the video, it will actually automatically turn on the other one too. So they both they go together.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I didn't realize that until the other day. And of course, that may not have been true yesterday. You know, with Zoom updating things, you never know how things are going to change.
That's right.
That update won't happen until September, though. So that big update won't happen until they postpone that till September.
Well, it's good to see Sapphire is here.
Mm-hmm. I saw Sapphire. Her name.
That's great. And we see lots of other names.
Yeah.
Too, of people who are here. There's Ann Brandon. Good to see you, Ann.
And Dawn.
And Nancy. Good to see you this morning,
There's
Nancy.
Sapphire. Lee, if you can hear me, I just set up this morning your inclusivity team meeting on Zoom 3.
Oh, it's not in the regular.
No, he requested Zoom 3, and I thought that was on purpose because I know you were going back and forth about where to have it.
If it's on Zoom 3, then I'll definitely want to let people know if they, because people might show up in the regular.
Okay, we should
Zoom
probably. Okay, I sent him the invite, so he should be able to get it to the inclusivity team.
Good to see you this morning, Matthew. Oh, people are coming back. Hooray.
All right, let me mute.
All right. Excellent. Chris, you going to put the joy and sorrow slide up?
In a minute. Yep.
Okay, great. When it's ready. Great. I'll use that as my cue.
One, zero.
Celebrate the countdown. And welcome back. Hope you had an enjoyable time in your breakout room. And we are moving to joys and sorrows. We set aside time in our service each Sunday for celebrating significant personal milestones in our lives. If you have one that you'd like to remember, we do it in the Zoom setting in 3 different ways. One way is joys and sorrows that come into the office during the week. We read first. Then, if you would like to share a live joy or sorrow, you can raise that little blue hand in your participant window so that we can call on you, that Chris will call on you, and you can share your joy or sorrow. And the third option is to write something in the chat. And if you'd like that read aloud by one of our pastoral care associates, Randy Rosette will do it today, then put read aloud right in the first part of your message. And Randy will know to read it aloud. So, Chris, what have we got?
We have one concern from Michael Hornsby, who relates to us that Helen Hornsby Martin, his 94-year-old aunt, passed away last Sunday. She was the last of Michael's father's siblings. Thank you, Michael, for that. And we have one in the waiting, and Julie Lameau, go ahead.
Hi, I'll just report I had Mohs surgery for basal cell cancer on my face on Wednesday, and I'm purposely kind of in the dark here, but it went well. It gave me a little black eye, but it went well, and the annoying thing is I haven't been able to bend over or exercise, so I'm looking forward to going back, being able to swim and be in my garden, but meanwhile I can't pick anything up for a couple more days.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you. And we have one more. Let's go to Marilyn Doctor.
Yes, we have, our one dog Zoe is not doing very well. I think we're going to be losing her soon. And it's upsetting us.
Yeah,
She's a big part of our family.
of course.
Thank you.
That concludes the live Joys and Sorrows.
Okay. Randy will be reading next.
Let's see. Tammy says, happy to be back from the North and South Dakota celebrating the life of my wonderful father-in-law. Tanya Hoteland says, is asking for prayers for her friend Becky, who is in hospice. And Elizabeth is thinking of her friend Mary, who has been fighting metastasized ovarian cancer and is now facing artery surgery after suffering a stroke. Jan McCracken says that her mother-in-law, Riley's grandmother, Frances, passed away very peacefully this week. She will really be missed. And I believe Susan Standfast says, my joy is that my sister is recovering at home after surgery for stage 2 colon cancer. I think that's it, unless you see that I missed anything.
Okay, thank you. And for all the joys and sorrows that we have heard, there are always joys and sorrows that are left unspoken. And we like to move a stone to honor them as we hold all that we've heard and felt in our hearts. And this morning, I have a song along with a meditation that came from one of the worship services at General Assembly. I Know I Can is in our hymnal. It's number 1015, but this is such a beautiful rendition of it. I wanted to share it with you. And then Teresa Soto has a beautiful meditation that was linked to it. So I put them together for our song and spoken meditation this morning.
We invite you to rise in body or in spirit to sing number 1015 in your teal hymnal, I Know I Can.
Return.
prayer, and sharing. Will you join me in a spirit of prayer or meditation? As we come together today, we remain apart. We carry the loss of each other's physical presence with courage, but also with grief. Here, in this moment, we tenderly bathe this grief with care and our resolve that each of us matter as much as all of us, that the world toward which we move has a place for our most vulnerable, and that there is a future in which we are together again. We are solemn and we are hopeful. All is not lost. We are here now. For all these things, we give thanks and say amen and ashe.
And this is the time for us to have our offering. We support the good work of our congregation through your generous donations. And I can show you a couple of ways to do that. We have a tiny URL that links to Albany UU-donate. And we also have a texting option as well. And there's some examples of how to do that. If you're sending $20 to the collection plate, text just the number 20. Or if you want to donate something to your pledge, you can do that as well, but adding the word pledge at the end. And we have this beautiful offertory music. This is Bobby McFerrin's piece, the 23rd Psalm, along with the Slicks and Friends. So hope you enjoy that. We're again doing something a little different than originally planned for this service. We're celebrating and giving a report, bringing back some of what we saw and felt at GA. And Jan McCracken will be our first speaker.
Hi, everyone. So thank you, Sam, for inviting me to speak today. I appreciate that. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today. I was thinking what a bummer it would be if nobody showed up. So I'm really glad to see all you here. I'm going to speak a little bit about my experience at GA, and the reason I wanted to go to GA so much this year was because it was supposed to happen within a comfortable driving distance in Rhode Island. And I was really hopeful that more than the usual people from our congregation would attend. I was thinking that maybe we could even entice more youth and some newer members to go. And I was looking so forward to all the activities that I remember loving at GA, carrying our banner with my Albany UU friends, sharing meals, attending the business meetings in the great big hall, worshiping together in services that are so well produced, and being Sharon's roommate. Not to mention going off in all directions to workshops, lectures, meetings, and the coveted exhibition hall, all of which would stimulate our nervous system with that power of engagement. And then there was this little virus that came through that threatened my picture of happy anticipation. And it was followed by the announcement that GA would be entirely held in virtual space. So I shifted my thinking about GA to consider participating from a little square box, my laptop, just like here. Essentially, I went to GA alone. I went in my living room, my kitchen, my dining room. I even took GA to bed a couple of nights. It was engaging, inspiring, and exhausting. Pretty much how I remember how I felt at the several GAs I've attended in the past. I took in volumes of information and resources, and some money in my pocket was saved from the reduced registration fee and no traveling expenses. So for 4 days, my fire was lit. When I looked back at the pages and pages of notes I took, I counted that I attended 6 general sessions as a delegate, I think 6 workshops, maybe more, 5 lectures, and 5 worship services. And I can keep going to GA all summer because everything was recorded. I think Sam mentioned that. Oh boy. So I'm here to report that I survived virtual GA and recommend it as a viable alternative to meeting in person. Some benefits lost, some benefits gained, but basically a win-win. Let us not diminish the collective power of hundreds of UU congregations, aligning their values with actions, whatever the venue. We're pretty amazing. So I'm returning to congregational life with a renewed vitality and a little more pep to be of use. I got rooted, ready, and inspired, which was this year's theme, and it's close to how I feel right now. I'll conclude my remarks to say something of this energy moving in me post-GA. No surprise that UU as I am, I left with more questions and fewer answers. So I'd like to pose just a few of the inquiries that emerged when I reflected back on just a little bit of my learning, because there was really so much. So I ask these questions. Number 1, dismantling white supremacy is hard work, and we say we want to do it. Can we look in the mirror and see who needs to do the work? Number 2, what will accountability look like in our congregation? Are we ready to ensure that we are being inclusive in all our practices? Number 3, we are developing a new system of governance here at Albany UU. Do you know about it? How transparent are we? Number 4, have we made an idol of congregational polity? Number 5, have you ever experienced a club-like mentality in this congregation? I have, because I've been part of the club. And what club is that? Number 6, how do we do conflict? I think some of it we hide under the floor wax because we don't have a lot of rugs. Number 7, how will we encounter the joy and pain of this big, inevitable next phase of our growth as a congregation within the denomination? And number 8, just what is our capacity at Albany UU? I want to support our aspiration to be inclusive and create beloved community. I want to make room for the mistakes we will make along the way. It's much easier to attend to the external work when there is internal strength. I have no doubt in the intellectual prowess of this congregation to think through the complexities of building a better world. I've been part of this congregation for over 60 years, and I have some experiential sense of who we were and who we are. I don't know who we will be, but I'm willing to go there with you. I trust the spirit of love moving through us and our collective moral compass to guide us. I hope we can focus on our vision, all of us moving together, whatever part we choose to play. I dream about all our processes, procedures, and practices being aligned with our purpose and values to sustain a vision, to heal the world. So meanwhile, I'm willing to keep making phone calls, do email, go to protests, make muffins, and any other number of things that I can manage within my capacity. My faith in my faith tradition is always heightened by the GA experience. Thank you for listening today.
Okay, I guess I'm going to jump right in there. I'm Jackie Williams, and most of you have not seen me for a while because I don't usually have my video on. I also was able to participate in the virtual General Assembly this year, which was, as Jan said, a new experience for everyone. I wanted to start with some of the big picture business things first, and then back into my own personal rooted, inspired, and ready experience. One of the things, as Jan and Sam mentioned, is that the General Assembly is the business meeting. And I want to stress that it's the international association, because when you're physically there, so are people from countries in Africa and Japan and Caribbean islands, and of course the congregations that are partners and people from all over that you may not have thought about as Unitarian Universalists. I know my very first one in 1998 was in Rochester, New York, and I watched the banner go by for Transylvania, and thoughts of Dracula definitely came into my mind. I was a new UU trying to figure out who these people are, and I wasn't quite sure I was in the right place. But back to General Assembly. The business part, after the 4 days of workshops and singing and worships and enjoying roommates and staying up and eating out, there is business that is done. This was not a big election year. There was no contest between those who were running. We have some new co-moderators, and which is kind of an exciting thing. But the biggest thing was the responsive resolution. And for those who've never heard of such a thing, it's something that is brought up at a General Assembly, voted on by the delegates, and Albany had 8, Jan and Sam being 2 of them, that the responsive resolution is supposed to come back to the congregation to be discussed and talked about and then voted on in subsequent General Assemblies. The one that was approved at this General Assembly has to do with responsible investing in terms of, I can't read this way. I'm gonna have to turn on the light. It has to do with investments, which is something we've been discussing for about the last decade, about being responsible and having our money go where our mouth is. The other ones that I wanted to talk about briefly were the actions of immediate witness. And just as the name says, these are things that the people at General Assembly bring up at the time. There is discussion, there's opportunity to reword and rewrite, and then there's a vote on the things that we say we want to bring back to our congregations and actually work on right now, not in future years. And there were 6 that were proposed. The 2 that were passed, one has to do with 400 years of white supremacy, which is a phrase that Jan just mentioned. This has come up before we discussed the doctrine of discovery and the fact that the year 2020 is the 400th anniversary of the Mayflower landing. In case any of you had ancestors on that ship, it's been 400 years, as opposed to those of us who say that Plymouth Rock landed on us. The second act of immediate witness is called Amen to Uprising. And this has to do with the killing of Black and brown people in this country. And it also includes defunding the police. It includes civil disobedience. It includes voting. It includes getting out and doing something, not just with our words. So this is the part that Jan mentioned, making the phone calls. That includes the UU the vote. So an act of immediate witness, these are things that we're called to do right now. And we will have more information in these in our daily messages. The responsive resolution that has to do with upcoming, the two that are going to be looked at in future years, the three actually. One has to do with the pandemic as looking as a religious response, supporting and investing in youth and young adults in Unitarian Universalism. One of the things that did not happen in this virtual General Assembly was the active participation of youth and young adults. The staff who normally do the work decided that they were not being compensated fairly and backed out. And there's also going to be a discussion about widening the circle, which has to do with intersectionality and accountability. You're going to be hearing quite a bit more about the Commission on Institutional Change. So all of these changes that actually go back to the root of white supremacy. I want to switch over and tell you a little bit about my experience with General Assembly. As I said, it started in 1998 in Rochester, in a facility that in no way could have held the almost 5,000 people who registered for virtual General Assembly. I went to that one only because I heard that there were UUs of color. From where I was in Glens Falls, I couldn't tell that. And that there were women clergy. So I went specifically to look. And then starting in about 2001 up until this one, I went because I was participating as a delegate, a committee person, or on a task force. I was not planning on returning to Providence this year. I was there in 2014, the last time it was in Providence. However, at that time I had just finished chemo. I was bald. I didn't even have these little things on my head. And I had to use an electric scooter to get around. So returning to Providence was not high on my list. And it wasn't until Peggy Sherman notified me that our congregation had actually allocated more funds for delegates, registration, and travel and housing expenses. But since we weren't going to have housing and travel expenses, that there were funds available for more people to register. So almost at the very last minute, I was able to register. So thanks to the congregation for allowing me to do that and to be able to attend fabulous workshops. 3 I want to mention very briefly because I know we're going over. In terms of rooted, inspired, and ready, I doubt most of you know that there is a very long history in Unitarian and Universalism of Black women clergy. A friend, the Reverend Kiyama Rahman, has written an anthology which will be published next year. So she gave a workshop on it that was absolutely fascinating, and it was inspiring and exciting. And I feel, unfortunately, one of the actual first Black woman clergy to make it through the MFC, the Ministerial Fellowship Committee, was not able to attend at the very last minute, but there were some fabulous others who talked about their stories. John Burens, who was a former president of the UUA, he was the first president of the UUA that I ever met, talked about unusual friendships. And one of the examples that he gave was between Frederick Douglass and Theodore Parker, a noted early Unitarian founder, preacher, got kicked out, was brought in. He was an abolitionist as well as Unitarian and transcendentalist, and he died relatively early. Frederick Douglass was his friend, and he went to visit his grave in Italy 30 years after he died to find that it was a very meager, flat nameplate. That was it. And thought that, no, this man deserves much, much more than this. As a matter of fact, Frederick Douglass says, the stone of such a man's grave should be a sermon, which was awfully poetic. So the idea that people who were working for freedom on many levels, and in this case, we're talking back to white supremacy, because Parker was an abolitionist. He worked to free a number of enslaved people, as did Frederick Douglass. The last workshop I attended was on Sunday afternoon with Reverend Chip Rouse, and he talked about rituals of recharging. As Jan said, General Assembly is exhausting. Even sitting in home, in your bed, at your kitchen table, it is exhausting hearing all this wonderfulness and singing songs and people that you might have met years ago. So having rituals that you're able to use to get yourself back up and going, whether you write the notes, whether you look at the video again. And I loved his workshop because he did things that were familiar and interesting, like using the pagan ritual of calling the 4 directions or the 4 winds and adding a 5th, which was cyberspace. So in the year 2020, you're taking what's old and you make it new. And he added things to worship that included gentle movement and memory, as well as words, and things that I hope to share with our worship leadership team so that we can use and take advantage of here in Albany. General Assembly is a place where I marched in the rain. I stood with people arm in arm. I cried, I sang, I marched along riverbeds with giant puppets. I got to hear Southern Poverty Law Center Morris Dees to Brian Stevenson of the Equal Justice Institute. I got to stand next to and chat with Melissa Harris Perry about her feet aching and have lunch with Michelle Alexander. Those kinds of things are not going to go away, even if we can no longer meet in person. Being able to get 5,000 people registered by lowering the registration rate and allowing people to do it as is possible for them is something that's being looked at. And I'm excited about how that's going to turn out. So here in Albany, you're going to be hearing more, you're going to be seeing more, and we will have a link on Monday's announcements about where you can find the information on the responsive resolution and the actions of immediate witness. Thank you for allowing me to share this part of General Assembly. Oh, and I think that I counted that this was probably about my 17th. Back to you, Sam.
Thank you, Jackie. And we have a musical interlude here for you. Another song that was performed at General Assembly, I believe in being ready.
Our centering song this morning is I Believe in Being Ready. It's a traditional song that speaks of the end times from a gospel perspective. Whatever your theology, though, this song celebrates readiness as a choice we can make and as something we can do together in community.
I believe in being ready. I believe in being ready. I believe in being ready, for the time is drawing near. I believe in being ready. I believe drawing near. I believe in being ready. I believe in being ready. I believe in being ready, for the time is drawing near. For the time is drawing near. For the time is drawing near. For the time is drawing near.
All right. Thank you, Jackie. Thank you, Jan, for your words. My first Unitarian Universalist General Assembly, Jackie's late 90s, mine was in the June of 1986. It was held in Rochester, New York as well that year. Travels around the country. I believe I've only missed 3 of them since then, which means I've attended 31 General Assemblies. Over those years, I've seen some significant changes. In 1986, most of the people speaking from the podium were white men, although Natalie Goodbranson was the moderator that year. The music was classical with some jazz and folk pieces mixed in. The worship services followed a Protestant model, focusing on words. Most of the hymns were Protestant with theologically massaged lyrics. We had recently changed the words from the 1960s blue hymnal to stop referring to God with masculine gender references. These changes were stimulating the development of a new hymnal. We know it today as the Gray Hymnal, Singing the Living Tradition, published in 1992. The growing influence of women was being felt that year. In 1977, the UUA passed the groundbreaking Women and Religion Resolution, a reason God wasn't being referred to with male pronouns anymore. Congregations were adding new liturgy, like chalice lighting, responding to the need for religious educators to teach our children our values, and for social activists to ground our social activism in our values. The purposes and principles had been passed the year before. Change was in the air. Maybe 90+% of our ministers were men at this point. Very few people of color were in our ministry and attending that General Assembly. I doubt if any racial justice issues were discussed at that General Assembly, except passing resolutions making moral statements about what was happening in the larger society. I share this snapshot of 1986 to help frame the ongoing transformation happening today that Jackie was referring to. I'm sure there were older white men in 1986 who felt things were changing in ways that caused them discomfort as they watched the rise of women in our ministry stepping into more and more pulpits. But mostly what I saw was excitement, acceptance of those changes, and a readiness to move forward. Let's fast forward to 2020. Today, major changes are happening in our religious tradition, centering on racial justice. Instead of only looking outward at the changes we want to make in the larger society, we are looking inward, critiquing our institutional structures. Race relations within our association has been a sore wound for UUs since the Black empowerment controversy of the late 1960s. At that time, many of our congregations were active in civil rights efforts out there in the world, but were not aware of or able to address what we would now label as white supremacy culture within our institutions. This is a long and fraught story that I can only touch upon now with some quick highlights that mostly center on General Assembly. In 1993, at General Assembly, a Jefferson Ball was organized and participants were invited to come in period costume. Black GA participants were insulted, asking if they should come in rags and chains. In response to that 1993 GA, the 1995 GA spent a whole day working on diversity issues to take seriously anti-racism and anti-oppression work. 2001 saw the election of our first Black UUA president, the Reverend Bill Sinkford. In parallel to Obama's presidency, Sinkford was able to make some changes, but some of the systemic changes at the UUA he couldn't get done. He did get more Black UUs moving into our ministry, and that has made a big difference today. In 2009, we elected our first Hispanic UUA president, the Reverend Peter Morales. The consolidation of several different Black organizations into Black Lives of UU became visible as at the 2016 General Assembly. 2017 was a very turbulent year. That was the UUA hiring controversy that triggered the resignation of Peter Morales, leading to 3 Black UU leaders serving as co-presidents for 4 months to complete Morales's term. This led to the formation of the Commission on Institutional Change. That year also saw the election of our first woman UUA president, the Reverend Dr. Susan Frederick Gray. The final report of the Commission on Institutional Change was delivered at this year's General Assembly, bringing UU institutional white supremacist practices into focus. This report is the most far-reaching assessment of systemic racism within our UU institutional structures. There are lessons for our congregation as well as for the UUA in Boston and UUA field staff. I marveled at how different this General Assembly was from my first in 1986. Every workshop and most exclusive presentations had speakers who are Black, Indigenous, and people of color. The Commission on Institutional Change report, the actions of immediate witness, the responsive resolutions Jackie was referring to, the business that we did for our association made sweeping commitments to dismantle white supremacy within our association and in society at large. I'm sure there were white folks present who were uncomfortable with these changes, but mostly, overwhelmingly, what I saw was excitement, acceptance of those changes, and a readiness to move forward. The foundation for this change is honoring and embracing what is required to welcome differences of race, sexual orientation, gender identity, and belief. To live into the reality of what is required to welcome difference has emotional and physical consequences. Welcoming difference means a commitment to being willing to be uncomfortable at times. That discomfort has value because it is a precursor to growth and development that liberates us from harmful patterns of social conditioning. We are all the product of cultural programming for both good and ill. White folks didn't decide they wanted to fear young Black men. The culture taught that. Black folks didn't want the trauma that comes with growing up in a racist society. The culture inflicted those wounds. We all have harmful social conditioning, today labeled white supremacy culture. It isn't good for any of us and doesn't allow us to live into the dream of building the egalitarian, loving, and just society we desire. What I'm bringing back from General Assembly this year is an ever deeper commitment to work on building beloved community. I believe in being ready to take on the challenges of ongoing transformation within our religious tradition. The time is drawing near when that work must be done and can be put off no longer. Signs and wonders are coming when we do it. When, not if, we make mistakes, we'll turn around and start over and begin again in love. That concludes my remarks. Let's turn the podium over to Patty Jo to give her concluding words.
Good morning. This was my first General Assembly. I'm a big fan of the conference experience in general, but being situated at the end of the school year has been a prohibitive factor for my attending GA. This year, even the end of school wasn't situated at the end of the school year, so I was glad for the opportunity, and I really loved it. The energy, the music, the topics, and the very many thoughtful and committed people. My fellow UUs, our fellow UUs. A couple of the ideas were new to me. Most were ideas we've been talking about at Albany UU over the years in various ways, but have struggled to meaningfully act upon. Most notably, our inclusivity and anti-racism efforts. What I hope we can share with the congregation is the enthusiasm, the momentum, and leadership in evidence throughout GA. I attended a workshop that explored how we can want change and be resistant to it at the same time. An all too familiar experience, and no doubt a source of frustration for the people of color in our congregation. Another workshop explored strategies for inviting people into an anti-oppression discourse, the importance of finding common ground, the human connection. This is important because we will have some difficult conversations as we look inward at our congregational culture and explore ways to make it more welcoming, more inclusive. And we will do that work, for we've consistently highlighted diversity as a strong value and an aspiration for our congregation. We've expressed a deep desire to be a truly welcoming and inclusive congregation. This effort will bring challenges, and we will need to sit with discomfort, struggle with new meanings, allow long-held assumptions to be questioned, make ourselves ready for change. And it will also bring joy and opportunity, new learnings and realizations, and greater breadth and depth of connection with one another, more common ground. This is a unique time in our denomination, in our country, in the world. Anti-racism work is the moral call of our time. Racism robs all of us of our humanity. An active ministry of racial justice is necessary and sacred work. Sacred because we deem it to be so, because we recognize the degree to which our humanity is at stake. We cannot ignore this call, cannot close our eyes to what is happening on our watch. Let us not be good people who look on and do nothing. Instead, let us embrace this sacred work to lift hearts, broaden minds, and do justice in the world in service of building beloved community.
And let us conclude with a song. Wake Now My Senses. Again, led by Randy and Chris. Encourage you to sing along. Our discomfort. Brave enough to be clumsy there. Loving enough to forgive ourselves and others. May we, as a people of faith, be granted the strength to be so bold, to be so brave, to be so loving. So be it, and we give our thanks now to our participants in the service. And I have one announcement. Karen Kaufman is going to be on in just a second, so she's getting herself ready. Maybe we can see that last slide there, Chris. There we go. Our thanks to Chris Jensen, Randy Rosette, and Elena Karpoff. Thank you to our ushers, Don Dana, Dick Dana, Amy Jameson, and Chuck Manning. Pastoral Care Associate today, Phil Rich, and welcomer Barb Manning. And if we can find Karen Kaufman, she has an announcement about You the Vote she wants to share. So let's let Karen speak.
Thank you, Sam, and good morning, everybody. Today, we're less than 4 months from the most consequential election of our lifetimes. I believe that if everyone's voices are heard in November, there's no way that the ruinous administration we have now will be extended for another 4 years. But as we know, there are voter suppression efforts at work to prevent change. And that's why a few of us have signed up to join You the Vote, which partners with sophisticated political organizations to reach out to marginalized people who may not vote. There's an opportunity this Thursday to reach out to potential voters in Pennsylvania. We're partnering with Surge, showing up for racial justice, and there will be many more opportunities like this in the coming months. I urge everyone to act to live out our UU values in the public realm, where it is so needed right now. Our democracy is literally at stake. If you are interested, please contact me. I've left my contact info in the chat, and I hope I'll hear from you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Karen. And I think Carol Butt also has a plug for the breakfast coming up. We can unmute.
Thank
Carol.
you. Yep, it is. Okay. Yes, we plan to do our grab and go bags this next Saturday. So we're looking for some items for the bags, which can include cheese sticks, bananas, snack bars, juice containers, yogurt and spoons, muffins, breakfast bars, fruit, bread slices, cookies, anything else you can think of. Things would need to be individually wrapped or bagged. And to reduce plastic waste contribution, I have lots of wax bags to share with anybody who needs them. I would be glad to deliver you some bags. I hope I can manage that, and pick up your items and bag them at my house. Items can be delivered to my house, or I will send out some notification of when I might be at church so that we can do that. Or you can put them in the church refrigerator or the chest freezer of the pantry. Contact me by email or call me if you think you can help out with supplies or with volunteering on Saturday. I think we might have enough volunteers already. People have been so wonderful about coming up and offering things and offering their time. So we will need to limit the Saturday participation because of the COVID issue. So thank you very much to everybody in advance who will be contributing to Saturday. The people are loving getting the bags. So thank you very much, and I hope to hear from many of you. Thanks.
Okay, thanks very much. I think that's all the announcements that I see. So thank you for being here today. And if you would like